Hey folks, Dr. O here. I'm huggling up to the camera for a quick live for those of you who are property investors. Little tip for you. Actually, this question came up, funnily enough, before COVID at an event I was at in Gatwick, and it was somebody that had about 5 properties, all under one mortgage. So it was an umbrella mortgage, and he was wanting to sell some of those properties off and had been reading through his mortgage and found that there were some restrictions, and his belief was that he had to sell all of them off at the same time to redeem and clear the whole mortgage. Now, I know a little bit about this because I had a similar situation with 3 properties that we owned for a while under one mortgage, and actually those properties, or when I say a while, we've had them a while, probably about 10 years now. More, 12, 15, 2004, 2005, 15 years. So how it works is this, and again, it's worth thinking about, because if you're looking to buy properties and you're looking to do portfolio buying, sometimes one of the blocks that can occur is when you're dealing with the vendor says to you, well, my challenge is I want to sell these properties, but I've been told, or I believe, that I have to sell them all at the same time. What that means is, let's say you've got a 300 grand mortgage across 3 properties, each one with a mortgageable value. Let me rephrase that. Each one with a value of whatever, but the mortgage assigned to that property is approximately 100. So if the property's all different values when you bought them, the bank may consider that property number 1 has a mortgage equivalent of 100. Property number 2 might have a mortgage equivalent of 120, and then the last one might be a smaller property where the mortgage redemption figure might be 80. So you can't assume it's the same across all of them. That's an important point. Now, if you're buying from an investor and maybe you're being creative in a portfolio purchase, and again, I can't give you financial advice, remember, on these videos. I can just tell you from my own experience, and then you've got to go seek advice from your mortgage broker. But being creative as an investor, if you're looking to buy from an existing landlord and they're a bit nervous about this, what you need to do is see if you can get access to look at their mortgage and get them to call the mortgage company up. And, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, okay, it's dusty. Been out with the builders today. How it works is this. In the current climate, most lenders will actually be quite happy to pull down the existing debt on that property, especially if it's an interest-only mortgage. So the conversation that needs to take place with the lender is, hi, I've got, in this case, a portfolio of 3 properties, and I am looking to sell those properties, but not necessarily at the same time. So what can you do to help me so that I can pay back the mortgage, reduce that borrowing, and at the same time not have to pay the whole lot off in one go? And they will have a form typically that they send you. I wrote this down actually, because I wrote this down earlier as a reminder to tell you the name of the form. What is it called? No, I ditched it. All right, not to worry. Anyway, when you call them, tell them that you want a form. I think it's called a property release form. So out of the portfolio, they will say, we're happy to release property A, property B, or property C. You've got to tell us which property needs to be sold. So if you're sat, remember, your objective as a property investor and you're buying is to be as creative as possible and find a way to help the other person selling to you. And if you show them the process and become the person that gives them a solution, you'll be calling me then. So what happens is you would get them to call or you'd help them go through the process of calling the lender. Now, what the lender will do is they'll likely ask for a property released form to be filled in. And out of the 3 properties, what you do is you'd look to release property A and B. Now, what does that mean? If you say to them, I want to release A and I want to release B, by default, the 3rd property then becomes a standalone property. In other words, it's not part of a portfolio. They would then write back to you or contact you. They may do a market assessment. I don't think they're going to send a valuer in. They're likely to just look at a market assessment of the property, look at the proportion of the original values. Again, I'm giving you ballpark approach here, but they're going to look at the proportion of the different values of the properties when they were originally purchased and say, you know, if one is 10% below the other 2, and then the number 2 is 10% below the first one, they're probably going to do it that way. And you might end up with a smaller mortgage on property A, a medium mortgage on property B, and a bigger mortgage on property C, whichever order I've gone in there. Hopefully this makes sense. If they were all exactly the same when you bought them and approximately the same value, they may apportion the same mortgage against each one. So what does that mean? What that then means is that you then get the opportunity with the seller to think about how cleverly you can buy the property portfolio from him or her. And it might be, and there's a tax reason why you could do this, and this is another conversation for another day, but you can be clever and talk about capital gains tax. If they're selling in stages, they could reduce their tax liabilities potentially, but that's without knowing anything else about their situation, hence seek advice from a tax advisor. But it might be that you take property A first. And in doing that, they release that from the portfolio mortgage, and now they still owe the remaining amount, but now you can look to buy the second property from them and then the third property. Hopefully this makes sense. If it does, give me a thumbs up if anybody's watching and can engage with me. The same thing applies to you. So if you're selling your own properties and you've decided you want to release part of that portfolio, you can do the same thing. You can go and ask for a release of property form, and it might be you've got 5 and you want to sell, I don't know, 3 of them, but keep 2. And the reason you're doing that is because it might be a really favourable mortgage. So at the moment, if you've got a low rate variable mortgage and it's so low that you want to sell a couple to liquidate some funds to go do something else, but you don't want to lose that last 1 or 2 properties, these release forms would allow you to do that. Now, every lender's got different criteria, so I can't tell you it's going to be the same case for every lender. But that said, you've just got to talk to them and negotiate. This is, for 9% of you watching, this may not be a relevant at all because you may own 1 property with 1 mortgage. But if you've built a portfolio over time, which we did in the early days, we put some of our properties under umbrellas. For me, this conversation is actually quite a useful one to have with a lender, but to share with you. There are lenders that will do it. So you're basically peeling off different parts of the apple in stages, if you like. So, recap. You're selling your own portfolio, call up, see if you can release the portfolio in stages, selling off, and it might be that the first property is, for example, a mortgage of 85,000, but the property could sell for 105,000. So they would tell you, you've got to redeem 85 on this property out of the portfolio. You sell for 105, you keep the 30, but the other 2 properties or other 3 properties stay in the mortgage at that same rate in theory, unless they want to add another higher rate to you, but that's a conversation you've got to have with them. And now you've brought some liquidity and you've got 30k, so actually I don't want to sell anymore right now. That's typically how it works. And the same thing with the person selling to you. So you can have that conversation and say, well, if you sold this one, you're likely to walk away with this much. You've got to think about your tax, but also you could reduce your mortgage. It might be that you choose to take the 30 and use that to bring down the remaining outstanding mortgage on the others. And that's another conversation you can have with a lender. Good. Technical message. Anyway, hopefully it was useful. See you on my next live.